Gerai. Tuo dar. Gerbiama Seimo pirmininkė, ministrė pirmininkė.
Madam Speaker of the Seimas, President Svetlana, President Vytautas Landsbergis, it is an honor for me to ask you to address this forum. But before that, some organizational technical details. We have translations into English and Russian. Russian is channel 2, Russian is channel 3. You can use same as open wireless internet connection. And those who are following our conference can ask questions via YouTube. This is the second conference. After the first conference, the entire world recognized Sветлана Tihановskaya as a democratic leader of Belarus. The entire world renounced illegitimate President Lukashenko in Belarus. He was only supported by Putin, who was called a killer by President Biden. This year will be important. We will see whether the Belarusian nation will win or this regime will do everything to suppress it. So it depends on everything, on this conference, on further actions. These 4 years have to be used beneficially so that we achieve free and democratic elections in Belarus. Therefore, I would like to give the floor to the Speaker of the Seimas, where Sветlana Tihановskaya was referred to as the main leader of the Belarusian opposition. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Žygimantas Pavilionis. Presidents, ladies and gentlemen, it's nice to see you all here. Before I start talking about the importance of parliamentary work for democracy in Belarus, I'd like to pause and make a brief comment on the development of democracy and the rule of law in the world. I think this is very relevant today. Quite often we hear the expression attributed to the ancient Roman historian Cornelius Nepos, "Si vis pacem para bellum," if you want peace, prepare for war. But for me personally, the maxim which adorns the facade of the Peace Palace in The Hague is much closer to my heart. "Si vis pacem para justitiam." If you desire peace, cultivate justice. The idea of justice is now as relevant as it was thousands of years ago. We understand that in today's global, highly packed with diverse information world, the search for justice has ceased to be a mere field of activity of thinkers and romantics. Injustice, on the other hand, is just the fate of the victims. As Milan Kundera has rightly observed, the unity of humanity as that generated by globalization means that no one can escape anywhere. In other words, justice justice ensured in one society gives a chance for the whole of mankind, and injustice experienced by those thousands of kilometers away has consequences for us here and now. In Western democratic societies, the idea of justice has crystallized into the concept of democratic values, in which human rights and the rule of law are paramount. These constants form the basis of our common Western consensus on common values. Unfortunately, the content and significance of these constants are already undergoing transformations in Europe's old democracies in the same way as in societies which in EU documents are referred to as a through shame as the partner countries of the EU Eastern Neighborhood Policy. I believe that it is through this prism that the Western approach to the processes in Belarus and support for its society needs to be assessed and defined. Today, we together and each of us individually must show not only empathy, but an example of a value-based approach. The Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania and I personally joined the initiative Politicians for Freedom. Our politicians have assumed a personal obligation to take care for the release of political prisoners in Belarus. I'll do my best to seek the release of the Belarusian journalist Ihor Losik. I invite everyone to contribute to this movement. This is not a struggle of Ihor, his family, and the like-minded. It must become a struggle of each of us. At the parliamentary level, the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania has raised and will continue to raise the issue of free and democratic elections under the auspices of the OSCE. By the way, I'd like to remind you that the Seimas was the first not to recognize the results of the elections in Belarus and to impose respective sanctions. And I believe that it is also symbolic that this year's Freedom Prize of the Seimas was awarded to Sветlana Tihановskaya. Let me conclude by saying that the Belarusian society, like the rest of the world, is currently at some kind of a bifurcation point, when society has lost balance and there is uncertainty. We do not know whether this system will continue to become more chaotic or will move to a qualitatively new level. I do not want to speculate on the direction Belarus will take, but we must do everything we can to make Belarusian society and people free. This is something that I sincerely desire and I believe in. When it comes to metaphors, we must spare no effort to ensure that societies of both Belarus and the world, when making their minds between the maxim of Cornelius Nepos and that of Milan Kundera, choose the latter. I wish you all a good debate. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now I'd like to give the floor to our Prime Minister, Ingrida Šimonytė. I hope she will share her insights about the previous conference. Ms. Šimonytė was probably the only person who has listened to all the speeches of the Kalinovska's conference last year. I'm very happy and grateful that you have found time in your busy agenda to speak at the Kalinovsky Forum. Well, I know that due to various cultural wars, it is very difficult to focus strategically and to help our brothers and sisters behind our borders. But I am grateful to you for coming to us. Thank you. Thank you for the given word. Madam Speaker, Madam Svetlana Tihановskaya, Professor, President Vytautas Landsbergis, honorable guests and colleagues. I'm glad that for the second time already Friends of a Free Belarus are gathering in Vilnius, even despite the fact that due to the pandemic, there are fewer of us in this hall and many are participating in this event online. It is symbolic that today the conference named after Konstantin Kalinovsky is taking place in the Seimas, where Lithuania's independence was restored. I hope that the day will soon come when we will be able to meet in the parliament that is elected by the people of free and democratic Belarus. The memory of Konstantin Kalinovsky, who was the leader of the Lithuanian, Polish and Belarusian uprising, is alive, but his struggle is not won as long as all three our nations are not free. His name reminds us today that we share a common history, the history which began with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and grew into the Republic of the Two Nations, the history in which we had to endure centuries of oppression. Our nations preserved their desire for freedom, being under the yoke of the Tsarist Russia, burying their sons and daughters in 2 world wars, even though none of them was our war. Together, we have experienced occupations, exiles, and repression. We saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and soon that of the Soviet Union. Independent Lithuania and independent Belarus were back again on the world map. Together with the rest of the world, we believe that the Iron Curtain had fallen. Today, we see that we were wrong. Several fortunate nations managed to escape from under the curtain and return to the free world. I cannot describe the joy over the fact that my homeland, Lithuania, is among those fortunate countries. I also feel, however, a genuine personal pain that the Belarusian nation took only a sip of freedom. Once again, the Iron Curtain fell on their country with all its intolerable weight and cruelty. It's increasingly oppressing the Russian people who want freedom. When Lithuania celebrated the 30th anniversary of the restoration of independence last year as a full-fledged member of the EU and NATO, the Belarusian nation was once again deprived of its fundamental right to vote in elections. Women stood up to defend men, hoping that policemen would not raise their hands against them. This has unfortunately been in vain. For the 8th month running, Belarusians have been beaten, imprisoned, expelled from universities and dismissed simply because they have their own opinion, raise their flags, and want to be masters of their country. Journalists are imprisoned for the truth, not propaganda. Civil society is systematically being destroyed, and its leaders are forced to leave the country where there is room for only dictator Lukashenko and those who are humble, obedient, and conformist. Lukashenko created such Belarus with the help of the Kremlin, and this is what he is trying to maintain to the bitter. Life in the occupied Lithuania under the Iron Curtain seemed exactly the same. I still remember it. But what I remember even more clearly is a sea of the Lithuanian national tricolor flags and happy people proclaiming the end of the regime. The wave of the freedom that rose in one square flooded the streets and cities until it covered the whole country, washing away the oppression and ultimately bringing independence. When back in November 2019, Lithuanians, Belarusians and Poles brought the remains of Konstantin Kalinovsky to the Rasos cemetery for eternal rest, white flags flooded the road all the way from the Cathedral Square, along Pilies Street, and through the Gates of Dawn. Perhaps not many would have believed that it would not take even a year for hundreds of thousands of Belarusians demanding change to hoist their flags, flooding not only Minsk but the whole of Belarus. The change has already come. The legendary patience of the Belarusians has worn thin. People whose hearts are already free will never again agree to humbly submit to the regime. There is no way back for the dictator. The only way left is the free people's path to victory. It will not be easy and may not be short. Therefore, the Belarusian nation needs the support of a strong and united democratic world as never before. I thank the Speaker of the Seimas, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee Žygimantas Pavilionis, and organizers of this conference, and most importantly participants, for the fact that today, as the Belarus Freedom Day draws closer, we have the opportunity to reaffirm the support here in Vilnius. In August, tens of thousands of people in Lithuania and around the world joined the Freedom Way to support Belarusians in their struggle for freedom in order to remind everyone of the miracle at the Baltic Sea and encourage the people to work for their own miracle. Žive Belarus! Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. I would like to give the floor to President Svetlana Tihановskaya Today we are all stand by Belarusians, and we are together with you, and we hope that next time this conference will be held in the independent Belarus.
Dear Madam Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, participants of Kalinovsky Forum, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor for me to be a part of the second Kalinovsky Forum, this time speaking in front of you. Since the first Kalinovsky Forum on August 24, 2020, a lot has changed. Belarusians have grown and matured. We have learned how to speak our minds. We are better in expressing our opinions and needs, our dreams and worries, our frustrations and fears. Simultaneously, there are many things in Belarusian lives, individual and collective, that have gotten worse. In the present day, 22-year-old Belarusian Evgeny Kalinovsky, just like his namesake, is taking part in the revolution. Evgeny is a prominent student, a laureate of multiple national academic awards, a participant of international exchange programs. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for taking part in peaceful protest in the middle of summer 2020. The charges against him do not have any tangible proof. Letters to and from him are not mailed. He is subject to utter isolation and unfairness. One of Evgeny's former cellmates shared with his girlfriend that Evgeny didn't want to tell her about the horrors of prison in order not to upset her. What if your son, your brother, your loved one was to be detained unfairly and held in unhuman conditions? What if he was afraid to tell you how gruesome it all is, not to upset you? And what if this happened to your whole family, your whole nation? Over 32,000 people have been arrested in Belarus since August 9, 2020. More than 2,500 criminal cases have been initiated against journalists, human rights defenders, activists, and peaceful protesters. Over 1,000 cases of torture have been documented by human rights NGOs. There are 290 political prisoners in Belarus at the moment, and this number is increasing every day. At least 8 peaceful protesters were killed. Meanwhile, not a single government official has been held accountable for the brutality, repression, torture, and murder. Kastuse Kalinovsky said that it's not the nation that is made for the government, but the government that is made for the nation. The numbers make you understand that in today's Belarus, a dictator's evil intentions lead us to the point where we, as a nation, were forced to think we are made for the government. Now we are making the government for the nation, and we need your help. The position of someone asking for help is a vulnerable one. To be declined politely is something that Belarusians are used to. Trust me, we don't mind, as it is our own business to solve. Last week we launched an online platform that allows Belarusians to vote in favor of international negotiations with the current Belarusian government for the peaceful transition of power. Already around 650,000 Belarusians have expressed their wish for a new Belarus. We are forced to be reckoned with. And yet, we still ask for help, because to ask is to acknowledge our own weakness. At the moment, our greatest weakness is time. We can make this peaceful revolution happen on our own. But the clock is ticking while the fates of people are being destroyed. People lose lives, their loved ones, their jobs, their faith. This cannot go on. We need your help with the following. Organizing negotiations with Belarusian authorities on an international platform and being ready to form a diverse group of mediators. Immediately stopping the police violence and restoring justice and holding the ones in charge accountable, guaranteeing a safe return for the Belarusian people forced to flee, ensuring the respect of fundamental human rights. We are thankful for the help we have already received. Every gesture of solidarity, every sanction towards the dictatorship, every Belarusian refugee saved, every action that makes Belarusians acquire human rights is bringing up a step closer to democracy. Belarus is in process of peacefully fighting for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and human rights. These are all the values you stand for here in the European Union. Belarus is right on the border of the EU, and these values cannot be betrayed. We are very close to you. So let today's debate on this forum help us find actionable solutions that will matter. Thank you and ačiū.
Ačiū labai, prezidentė.
Thank you, Madam President. As I'm watching this, looking at this photograph, it seems that the times are repeating themselves. Well, you have said, and it is very symbolic that we have Mr. Landsbergis, the president, with us. Mr. President, what do you think we should be doing to help Belarusians win their freedom? Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I welcome brothers and sisters Belarusians. Previously, we had a different name for the people of Belarus. I welcome the forum for its attempt to speak up once again in the name and on behalf of the Belarusian nation. I congratulate the organizers of this forum as well as the guests and speakers of the forum. And I'd like to wish the forum every success in bringing the question of Belarus further so that it is echoed in the European agenda. The old Tsarist empire has glued a binary unit. We all remember the Stalinist regime. We all remember what happened when our nations were incorporated in the Soviet Union. But what if the nations lacked the will to preserve their identity? If we or other nations lacked the will to preserve their identity, this would be the easiest way and the gateway for Russia to incorporate the countries. When the nation which felt the precipice said no to the regime, it was a very significant move by the country. It was a very important event in Lithuania as well, because we have always taken care of our neighbors. When Pope Francis invited everyone not to remain indifferent, maybe his call will be heard in all the capitals of Europe, but also in Belarus. Indifference might mean and might lead to the collapse of the European civilization, and vice versa. Empathy towards others might lead to the revival of Europe and to the revival of humanity. In the space of Belarus, we've seen the brutal inhumanity. If brutal inhumanity is possible in this territory, it will be possible in other territories as well. If we remain passive to the problems of other nations, we might face another problem that might be brought together with China. In this part of Europe, we also can expect miracles to happen. Whether this miracle is to be happen depends on our brothers in Belarus. We should not be speaking about satrap, but about the satrapia as the public order. If Belarus, after Lukashenko, decides to be a European country, the spirit of Konstantin Kalinovsky would be very happy and would welcome such a path of Belarus. These were my remarks and my welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Now we begin the first panel, moderated by Margarita Šešelgytė, Director of the Institute of International Relations and Political Science at Vilnius University. Thank you, Mr. Paviljonis, Prime Minister, Speaker of the Seimas, President Landsbergis, Madam Tikhanovskaya, panelists who are here both directly or online, ladies and gentlemen watching us via YouTube. It is a pleasure to have you here in this symbolic place. This is a symbolic place for Lithuania's freedom and Lithuania's struggle for freedom. And it has two messages here. The struggle can be either successful when freedom wins, and another message is that in the struggle for freedom, like-minded people are very important. And the Kalinovsky Forum is the place where like-minded people meet who are willing to help Belarus in its fight for freedom so that the struggle is successful. Last year, the Kalinovsky Forum set the objective to help Belarus to hold free and democratic elections under the auspices of the OSCE. This was a very ambitious objective. We thought that it would happen earlier. Unfortunately, now we see this pause, and this panel that is called Reflections on Supporting Belarusian Freedom, What Have We Accomplished So Far, is dedicated to overview the status quo where we are now and what challenges are ahead of us and what needs to be done. And in this panel, we have a lot of participants and panelists. I would like to start from the first speaker and give the floor to the keynote speaker, Mr. David McAllister, Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the European Parliament. Mr. McAllister.
Yes, good morning, everyone. From Brussels, a warm welcome to all of you. It's an honor for me to address the Kalinovsky Forum. This conference brings together the leaders of Belarusian democratic forces, European and international organizations, as well as key parliamentarians and diplomats. So first of all, allow me to thank the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania and especially the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Zigmantas Paviljonis, for organizing this timely high-level event. And I also welcome especially Sветлана Тихановская. The leadership of Lithuania has been very important for keeping this issue of democratic change in Belarus at the top of the European political agenda, and rightly so. For centuries, this country had close historic links with Belarus. Nevertheless, the two countries went along very different paths following the fall of the Soviet Union. Lithuania, together with Latvia and Estonia, firmly chose freedom, democracy, and Euro-Atlantic integration. Sadly, Belarus descended into dictatorship since Mr. Lukashenko took power back in 1994. The increasing contrasts of the developments of both countries have undoubtedly contributed to the desire for change in Belarusian society that became so apparent last year. Vilnius, as we all know, is of course the closest capital of an EU member state to Belarus. It has also become a place for refuge for so many Belarusians who were forced out of their country for daring to resist against the Lukashenko regime. Vilnius and also Warsaw are the major hubs of activity of Belarusian pro-democratic forces, civil society organizations, academic institutions, and independent media. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of today's discussion, as I understand, is to take stock of what we have done since the dramatic changes in Belarus last summer occurred. I would like to briefly speak about the role of the European Parliament in recognizing and supporting the Belarusian democratic forces and also raising their profile at an international level. The European Parliament was the first EU institution that invited Sветlana Tihановskaya when it came clear that she was deprived of a victory in the presidential election through obvious fraud and falsifications. Ms. Tihановskaya appeared before the Committee on Foreign Affairs, which I have the honor to chair, already on the 25th of August last year. Since then, she has become a regular guest in the European Parliament, appearing in several discussions about the situation in Belarus. I would like to commend Ms. Tihановskaya and her team for her tireless efforts in drawing attention to the dire situation in Belarus and mobilizing support of the international community for democratic change. Democratic resistance is a joint effort of various Belarusian political forces, civil society organizations, human rights activists, and let me call them just ordinary people, who they all have had enough of living in a dictatorship and demand that the dignity and fundamental rights of citizens are finally respected. The European Parliament awarded its 2020 Sakharov Prize for the freedom of thought to the democratic opposition of Belarus, represented by the Coordination Council, an initiative of brave women, as well as prominent political and civil society figures, in recognition of their extraordinary courage in facing a ruthless regime. The cause of democratic movement in Belarus enjoys an overwhelming cross-party support here in the European Parliament. We have sent political signals through our resolutions, drawing attention to ongoing serious human rights violations and calling for concrete action by the EU and the 27 member states. We are engaged in regular contact with the European External Action Service and the European Commission, and I am pleased that the High Representative, Josep Borrell, will address this forum today. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we put the developments in Belarus on the agenda of our cooperation with the national parliaments of the member states and the neighborhood in the most recent interparliamentary conference organized by the European Parliament on the 2nd of December, and drawing together representatives of 30 different parliaments across the continent. We discussed the need for a united European response in support of democratic change in Belarus. The participation of so many representatives of national parliaments in today's discussions shows that this work is continuing. As the situation in Belarus keeps on evolving, it is important to be in close contact with the key actors in the democratic movement, to listen to their perspective and to know how we can effectively and meaningfully assist them. For this purpose, the European Parliament organized a digital fact-finding mission last December. Colleagues from different groups discussed the issues with representatives of the Coordination Council, of independent media, trade unions, civil society, and academia. Based on the valuable insights gained during these exchanges, the European Parliament is now in the process of defining and launching further actions, focusing on the fight against impunity, democracy support measures, and international mediation that would lead to a genuine national dialogue and a peaceful democratic transition. Justice is a particularly important aspect of our activities. The Lukashenko regime has been pursuing a punitive campaign against the participants of peaceful resistance, resulting in thousands of arrests and hundreds of political prisoners. We all have sadly witnessed that Belarusians have been imprisoned in inhuman and degrading conditions and subjected to torture. The perpetrators of these crimes against their own people need to know that ultimately they will face justice themselves. Once again, Lithuania has a leading role in this respect. It is the first European country to launch an investigation under the universal jurisdiction principle into crimes against humanity potentially committed by the Lukashenko security forces. It is an example that should be followed by other countries. On Thursday, the 25th of March, Belarusians will be commemorating Freedom Day. It will be a day of defiance against the regime which is once again preparing for a crackdown. In reaction to such systemic violations of human rights, a day later, on the 26th of March, the European Parliament will launch the platform for discussion and strategic coordination on the fight against impunity in Belarus. What is this all about? This initiative comes in response to the concrete needs of Belarusian human rights organizations. It aims to provide a space for all relevant actors to come together with a view to exploring ways to provide operational and strategic support to those Belarusian civil society organizations that are collecting evidence of human rights violations in the country. The regular meetings will bring together Belarusian umbrella human rights organizations, key international and local initiatives aimed at fighting impunity, as well as the representatives of EU institutions. The platform is a work in progress. It is a work in progress that will evoke to respond to the needs of civil society in Belarus. It is envisaged that it will perform the following three functions. First of all, regular independent assessment of the human rights situation in Belarus and allegations of human rights abuses. Second, acting as a coordination and contact center for stakeholders from Belarus and international actors working on Belarus. And third, providing expert advice and mentoring for Belarusian human rights defenders and other civil society initiatives. I sincerely hope that with these activities, the platform will be able to address important gaps in the international reaction to the ongoing human rights crisis in the country. To conclude, strength is in unity. This applies both to the Belarusian democratic movement and to all of us who are supporting it. We need to coordinate our efforts within the EU, but also to work with our transatlantic allies, the United States and Canada. We should use the renewed momentum in our relations with the administration of President Biden to define common action, also with regard to Belarus. The mass protests that erupted following the fraudulent elections show that a new Belarus has emerged. However, it is still being ruled by the old regime, which is trying to suffocate the spirit of freedom with an iron grip of repression. As the resistance regains strength after the harsh winter, the slogan of what we defined the events of last summer, we believe we can, we will win, is still very much relevant. I hope, dear ladies and gentlemen, that the insight shared in the Kalinovsky Forum today will inspire further action in support of the brave people of Belarus and their legitimate aspirations for a peaceful, democratic transition. Let me assure you that Belarus will remain at the top of the political agenda of the European Parliament. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to a thought-provoking discussion. And let me once again thank my friend Zygmantas Paviljonis for organizing this event. All the best.
Didelis dėkui ponui McAllisteriui. Thank you, Mr. McAllister, for your speech and for reaffirming that the issue of Belarus will remain on the EU agenda. The support of the EU and of the European Parliament is of crucial importance because this is the face of the European society. I therefore believe that the steps that the EU Parliament has taken are very important. Now, let me introduce the four participants of the panel. Now we will see the situation from within, in Belarus, and what is the situation like in Belarus, what is the status quo, what has been achieved and what must be achieved. So we have four speakers here. The first one is the coordinator of the Belarusian National Congress, Vladimir Kara-Murza. Then we also have the CEO of the European Dialogue Center, Mr. Anatol Lebedska, Belarusian civic leader, founder of the Human Rights Center, Vasna, Ales Beletsky, and the last but not the least speaker is the director of Freedom House in Lithuania, Mr. Vytis Jurkonis. All these people are here in person. Therefore, now I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Vladimir Kara-Murza. If you allow me, I will be speaking without the face mask because it is very difficult for me to breathe. Well, as I have already been infected, I've had COVID, so I am not dangerous to you any longer. I'm very happy to welcome and to congratulate the participants of this forum. The current world is changing very rapidly. There are things that have changed. There are problems that we were addressing in the last forum, so these problems are no longer existent. We see that Belarusian people went to streets to fight for their human rights and to fight for the European values. During the previous forum, we talked a lot about President Lukashenko, and it was said that he was the main figure in politics in Belarus, and it was him that we had to hold negotiations with. Now we have Madam Sветлана Тихановская. Today, the approach of the world towards Belarus is substantially different. Mr. Borrell also has a different view. I believe the first impetus for the change in the approach was due to the forum that was held in August last year. The forum was participated by Lithuanian politicians and diplomats who supported human rights activists in Belarus. I have to sincerely thank all the Lithuanians and politicians for their effort in supporting our fight for freedom. Well, if we looked at other countries, at the United States of America, Canada, China, or other countries, we will see that some people are inspired by the struggle the Belarusians have undertaken. Some still questions the path that our people have taken. They still believe that it is a dangerous thing to do. Many Belarusians, including me, wanted a fast solution. But it seems that a fast solution was not possible. At the same time, we all realized that if Lukashenko takes a helicopter to leave the country, he will come back in a tank with Mr. Putin. The annexation of Belarus would not be a solution. This would be an unconstitutional coup. Just like some years ago in the Ukrainian Maidan, the Belarusians took to streets last August. And the Belarusians did not talk about the replacement of one person in particular. We all demanded for new, free, fair and elections. Unfortunately, people who had a different mindset were detained. They were arrested, they were taken into custody, they were tortured, and their human rights were violated. When men went to streets with their bare hands against machine guns, when women took to streets with their bare hands against the gun machines. It was different than it was in Ukraine. The people of Belarus have demonstrated that they took a different approach to their struggle for freedom. Recently, President Biden said that the major problem that the international community has to solve is the increasing resistance to democracy. Today, we are talking about the problems related to the COVID pandemic or environment, but I do agree with the ideas expressed by the elected President Biden. There is lots of resistance against democracy itself. This is the major problem. And the events that are taking place in Belarus is just a part of the problem. I believe that I see the possibilities that the administration, the US administration or the European Union have. I don't think they have much instruments when it comes to Caucasian nations or Crimea. But I'd like to stress that Belarus provides the international community with an opportunity to fight for the authoritarian regime, to help the Belarusian nation fight the authoritarian regime. We don't need any arms. We are not asking for funds. We are asking the international community to undertake political and economic sanctions. This would be the fastest way to ensure that free and fair elections are held in Belarus. The things that are taking place in Belarus are very tragic. During the celebrations of Independence Day in Lithuania on the 11th of March, I said that if I had not had the opportunity to feel what repression was, I would not have believed that they can be that harsh. But once we see everything in reality, this harshness is even far more severe. We see the authorities torture the detained people. This is a nightmare, and we need to break free from this nightmare. And I know that irrespective of the help that we might receive from the international community, it is the people of Belarus that have to do their utmost to achieve their objectives. I am now addressing not only the ones who have taken the responsibility for the future of Belarus. I am addressing everyone present here and listening to us online. One famous poet once said, "There can be heroes without real victories." Why am I saying this? We have received messages from Madam Tihановskaya, and we hear that they are started talking about the new opposition of Belarus. When journalists used to call me, I would refuse to comment on the new leaders of opposition of Belarus. I hope that our objective is the same. We still want to ensure that new free and fair elections are held in Belarus. But we should not mislead ourselves. It seems that there is some division in the minds of the opposition. It seems that something has happened in the old opposition that has made an impact on the way they think about the events in Belarus. Therefore, I would call on everyone in the opposition in Belarus to always remember the reason why people went to streets. I do understand that we need to make decisions, but these decisions must be taken together so that we cannot feel the cracks in the opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Niklaev, for a very inspiring speech. Well, the fight should be owned by Belarus itself, but the West also should make its contribution. Today, the struggle between autocracy and democracy is becoming stronger in today's world. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Anatol Lebedska, who is the CEO of the European Dialect Center. Good morning, President Landsbergis, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. It is a great pleasure for me to be a participant of the Kalinovsky conference. I am sincerely convinced that this event will become a great investment into a new Belarus. You know, what is the most harsh moment of the day in Belarus? It's 7 a.m. in the morning, because at this time, the punitive institutions or organs come to detain people from the blacklist. If it's 7:30 on your watch, you understand that the possibility for you to be free takes only less than 24 hours. While we are going forward, we should always refer to the past. This is my proposal. We should not repeat the mistakes that we made in the past. The year 1996, the anti-constitutional revolt by Lukashenko. It was recorded by all international organizations. It was a crime because it was unconstitutional. But after some time, the international community did not qualify this unconstitutional overturn as illegal. Actually, this conformism resulted in today's situation. This was our mistake. We failed to convince our international partners that this should not be done. And it is a mistake by the international community that by no means should be repeated in the nearest future. I am absolutely convinced that the Kremlin, that Lukashenko will be looking for allies in Europe, in the Euro-Atlantic space, and will try to find the arguments in order to keep the status quo for a longer period as possible. We should not forget this moment. Recalling those times, Lukashenko privatized all the government institutions and all the areas of governments. He privatized the budget, the properties people had. If we compare Lukashenko in 1996 and 2021, he became even more powerful thanks to his privatization and his embezzlement. When we speak about the Belarusian regime, we have to understand that there are 4 pillars that the regime stands on. First is the Kremlin. Second is power institutions or institutions of power. Pillar number 3 is fair, and pillar 4 is people's dependence. The Kremlin is the most dangerous pillar. Without the Kremlin's support for Lukashenko, the international support wouldn't be needed in Belarus. We would be able to resolve our problem ourselves. What are the possibilities of the authorities agreeing to the dialogue? We should not be naive. The transit of the government and in the understanding of Mr. Lukashenko is to survive until a certain period of time. And to give his power to his son after his death. Therefore, negotiations can be only forced. And in this situation, the role of the international community is very significant. What are our expectations? Is a coalition of Euro-Atlantic countries. It is crucial now for Belarus. We do not demonstrate our weaknesses when we ask for help from external powers, because Moscow supports Lukashenko, and this is the biggest problem in our case. And in this case, we need to expect assistance and support from the international community. We are now fighting without a win situation. The economy of the country is problem number 1 for Mr. Lukashenko. This is a huge challenge to him. And it actually defines the attitude inside the country. Lukashenko is not the guarantor for sovereignty and freedom, because so weak Lukashenko is the challenge for sovereignty of Belarus in the nearest future. Russia will use it to its own benefit while trying to gain possession of our enterprises in Belarus. Well, the last initiatives that were voiced by Mrs. Tikhanovskaya, 600,000 people supported her proposal for free elections. This is a huge power, actually, and we need to find this positive moment to use this resource and potential. Therefore, I am addressing those who are pessimistic. 600,000 people. This is a signal of change. This is our resource and potential that can be used. What are our expectations? What should be done together? We need a coalition of Washington and Brussels. We also need realization of certain initiatives, including parliaments for New Belarus. We have friends in the Seimas of Lithuania, of Poland, in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. We have groups for democratic Belarus. But other countries do not have such groups in their parliaments, for example, in the Czech Republic and others. We need to use the parliamentary dimension as a factor of pressure on Belarusian government. As a sign of solidarity with Belarus, we need an umbrella organization with some coordinators so that national parliaments in the European countries, as well as Canada and USA, could act in unison. I think that this parliamentary resource has not been used to the full. So this umbrella parliamentary structure for the democratic Belarus is very much necessary for us. And therefore, we are asking for this from you. Another point is that we know that according to the universal jurisdiction, the processes started in Vilnius. It is crucial that tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, the Belarusian forces get the decision of the court from Vilnius, Berlin, or other countries where they are convicted. We have crimes, but we have also impunity, and these decisions are extremely important. Judicial institutions of other countries in Europe and around the world should join this process as well. In terms of positive support for Belarus, we need the decisions such as visa-free regime for Belarusians. This would be a key factor to open the borders. Belarusians have to have the opportunity to freely move. We knew a new Marshall Plan for Belarus, a specific plan so that Belarusians could adequately react to the propaganda saying that when Tsikhanovskaya comes, problems will arise. We need the understanding that international financial institutions are ready to help in order to ensure effective economic situation in our country. We need the training of new personnel. We need to train new judges to come to new Belarus so that we do not have the old judicial system. Our colleagues and partners can help us here. We also need a package of reforms in the constitutional justice of Belarus. We have communications and contacts with different international organizations, but the package of transformations and reforms, starting from the new constitution and ending with economic outcomes, is something that can be assisted by our international partners. I'm an optimist. I believe that the situation will change in our country, and that this constant fear that you can be detained will finally be forgotten and become the day of yesterday. I hope that this year we have free and democratic elections, fair elections, and that the next Kalinovsky conference is held in the genuine parliament in Belarus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lebedska, for a very clear action plan for the Western countries and what the Western countries could do to help the Belarusians hold free and fair elections. Well, you have talked about the 7 a.m. rule in your country and the huge numbers of people that have been arrested. But it seems that despite that, your struggle is still very successful. Now, let me give the floor to Mr. Ales Bilecki, Belarusian civic leader and founder of the Human Rights Center Vesna. The floor is yours, Mr. Bilecki.
Вот уже 25 лет.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In April, we and our center are going to celebrate our anniversary. Our center was the main center which faced this extraordinary situation in our country in August. Let me remind you that when more than 20,000 people were arrested in August last year and the detentions are going on, there were a number of launched pre-trial investigations. There are a lot of people imprisoned. We see that criminal cases are launched against them. We tried to document the unproportional use of force against the demonstrators. We also documented the examples of torture in prisons and other detention centers. Our center has also been persecuted. We are blamed for destroying the public order. In recent months, the Belarusian authorities have detained several journalists, including my friends, who helped the people in prison. Lawyers were withdrawn of their licenses to work for their support to the detainees. Today, it is impossible to achieve justice in our country because it seems that we have gone back to the Stalinist era. For example, last year, a case was brought against the court for organizing a demonstration. This reminds of the situation that was in 1940s in the Soviet Union. Now, any human rights activist who writes something on the social media or says something at work might be punished. At the end of this week, a mother of 5 children in Minsk was arrested because she was an active protester, as it was said in her arrest documents, because she hoisted a national Belarusian flag in front of her house. So now her children are alone because their mother is arrested. It seems that the crisis is getting even deeper. We are faced with economic problems too. So people who wanted to break free from the dictatorship now are facing torture and detentions. I wonder whether the United States and the international community is ready to remain complacent with what is happening in Belarus. Still, millions of Belarusians have not lost the hope that positive change will yet to come. But we do understand that we need the support from our neighbors, from the European Union, and from the United States. We are expecting a greater and more intensified pressure on the Belarusian regime. We also expect that the international community demands that the Belarusian authorities release political prisoners. Well, we do remember and we are grateful for the sanctions that have been imposed previously. We are looking forward for clear signals from Russia. We believe that that Russia is not allowed to interfere with the domestic matters of Belarus. We demand free and fair elections in Belarus. We hope that Belarusian citizens will be able to travel across the European Union, because our nationals have to see with their own eyes of what it is like to live in a free country. Only then we will be able to bring Belarus to Europe, to democratic Europe.
Thank you, Mr. Belatsky. While the situation of political prisoners is very poor, while living in a democratic country, it is still hardly possible to imagine for us to imagine the situation when your state of freedom is measured in 24 hours, when at 7 o'clock each morning you can lose your freedom. I would like to give the floor to Vytis Jurkonis, who is fighting for the rights of political prisoners and the people of refugees. Vytis does that, has been doing it for a very long time. He is the director of the Freedom House in Lithuania. Thank you very much.
I will start where I ended last time, like during the first Kalinovsky conference. Belarusian people are not afraid anymore. We should not be afraid either. Solidarity efforts were bigger than anticipated, but this is not enough. We've done a lot of meetings, we committed quite a lot of funding, we introduced sanctions, we were providing prizes for the Belarusian women, for the Belarusian leadership, for the Belarusian people, opposition, you name it. But it was not enough to support the aim of Belarusian people, and certainly not enough to protect them. We already heard testimonies regarding tens of thousands of those who were detained, those who were forced to flee, thousands who were beaten, tortured, hundreds who became political prisoners, were injured, and almost a dozen who were unfortunately killed. Violence didn't stop. It only became more targeted. We did quite well, but we are still afraid. I mean, international community looks like it is still afraid. I do believe that action plan is rather simple, and it is perhaps a very interestingly similar acronym, EAP. Sounds like Eastern Partnership. Elections stands for E, A stands for accountability and assistance, P stands for partnership for transition. The difference between two words, fear, being afraid, and fear, honesty, is just two letters, but in essence, the real difference is huge. I call for international community and Europe to walk an extra mile to be less afraid and to be more honest. When it comes to the elections, we don't need hundreds of thousands of Belarusians in the streets to remain honest. We were the ones who announced that the elections were falsified, that we do not recognize Alexandra Lukashenko. Then it's only fair to say that fair and free elections need to happen in 2021, not later on. Protests do continue, terror continues as well. So where are we in this regard? I am hearing quite often arguments that we don't have leverage. What would Moscow say? So when it comes to elections in 2021, I think that given that Sweden is at the presidency of the OSCE, given that we have a new leadership at the OSCE, I think we cannot really expect a better moment than 2021 to organize free and fair elections, because that's a natural step of what we declared in September. When it comes to Moscow, we need to understand the context here. Kremlin is busy now, and Vladimir can testify that with the upcoming so-called Duma elections in September 2021. Kremlin is, of course, active in Minsk now, but their position regarding the upcoming elections in Belarus was that it should be organized in 2022, when they are done with their repressions, with their falsifications. I don't like geopolitical arguments, but in this regard, when I'm hearing quite oftenly the geopolitical arguments from various politicians, let me bring this geopolitical argument. We need free and fair elections in Belarus before Duma elections. That means in 2021. Everything else is going to be Kremlin scenario. And let's be very fair about that. Point number 2, accountability. We don't need to see another 10,000 detained to honestly say that Belarusian regime is oppressive, that there are multiple perpetrators, and I give credit to those countries which launched the OSCE Moscow mechanism. That was very fast, the report was very good. I give credit to those countries which started the universal jurisdiction process, but we need also to understand that Belarus is not part of the European Court of Human Rights. And I think in this regard, we need to develop the mechanism of the international mechanism of accountability, not on the NGO level, but on the governmental level, to make sure that we have tools to protect Belarusian people. The other A, which is assistance, as I've said, we committed quite a lot of funding. But I've seen that in 2011, after the 2010 elections as well. What we need to say is that the majority of the committed funding should go inside Belarus. Let's be fair, that if we spend it on different advocacy efforts, on different trainings, that would be an amount spent for Belarus, but what Belarusian civil society needs now is the support inside Belarus at the moment. And it's very risky, and the Belarusian authorities are doing everything to make it possible to jeopardize the direct assistance to the human rights defenders, to independent media, to civil society representatives. So while committing the funding, it's of utmost importance to think about the mechanisms, how to support people who are still fighting for freedom and democracy inside Belarus. Point number 3, partnership for transition. Comprehensive plan for Belarus was mentioned. Marshall Plan was mentioned. We know that Belarus will change. And I want us to be prepared for that, to be committed for the future, change. Belarusian people have changed. The country as such hasn't yet. But when it will change, there's going to be a lot of reforms, and there's going to be a need for our technical advice, expertise, but also financial support for all the reforms. And let me finish with the last point, which is sanctions. Transatlantic community reintroduced sanctions for Belarus, 3 packages of EU sanctions, European Magnitsky Act, Belarus Democracy and Human Rights Act, which is a step to the right direction, but needs to go beyond our principled position, outlining individuals who participated in falsified elections or systemic human rights abuses is okay. But if we talk about a tool of pressure for the regime. We need to be targeting the money bags of the regime, companies which are closely affiliated of the to the president's office, until the demand for dialogue is met. I'm hearing way too often from different experts that sanctions do not work. If we focus only on the principled sanctions, which is doing the face saving of international community, that's one, but they are not made to pressure the regime, because most of the perpetrators are not traveling to Europe. But when it comes to the tool of pressure, we need to be chasing the money, and you know where to start. Start with, for instance, the Bremeno Group, and I know that there has been a lot of conversations at the European Parliament, in Brussels regarding that, so let's not be afraid and be honest. If we want to pressure the regime, we have tools for that, just we need to be determined. So I call European Union and international community to go from solidarity to action and focus on these EAP letters, elections now, accountability under international governmental investigations, assistance inside Belarus, and partnership for transition are long-standing commitment for Belarus, not only when Belarus is trendy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yorkonis, for a very clear agenda. What should be done to ensure effective steps? Before moving on to the next group of speakers, I'd like to draw the attention of those who are watching us online. You are welcome to raise questions, and after the presentations, all the participants of the panel will be able to answer your questions. I'd like to move on to the next part of the comments on the agenda. In the previous part, we heard as to what should be done in order to ensure that the Belarusian fight for freedom is successful. And the people of Belarus are looking towards Western countries, Western democratic countries. And among those democratic countries, there are countries which are more engaged in the issues of Belarus, and there are countries which are engaged less. Lithuania, Poland are the countries which are more engaged, including the Czech Republic, because these countries are well aware what it is like to fight for freedom and democracy. These countries have contributed greatly in providing their support to Belarus. Besides, they know well of the situation in Belarus. So now I would be very happy to hear comments as to what are our possibilities to help Belarus and help Belarus organize free and fair elections before the elections in Duma are held. This panel consists of very important speakers too. We have Mr. Richard Kols, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Latvian Parliament, Mr. Marko Mihkelson, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Estonian Parliament, Mr. Marek Kuchcinski, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Polish Sejm, and Mr. Pavel Fischer, Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security of the Parliament of the Czech Republic. First and foremost, let me give the floor to Mr. Richard Kols.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the floor. apparently I'm hearing myself. I don't know if it's on my side or on your side, but nevertheless, we'll sort it out. Well, first of all, thank you for the conference organizers, particularly Žygimantas Pavlionis, my dear friend and colleague. It is a vital topic, not only when it comes to Belarusian people, but also to our, neighboring country, and that very much reflects the situation in Baltic countries, the assumptions within our societies, and the support for the Belarusian people, towards democratic appeals. So what I heard from the previous discussions, one thing that really got my attention was the reaction from the West, and how the policymakers in our respective parliaments and across the EU first have reacted. As we know, there is a risk for falling in this, Lukashenko-style appeasement style. We saw in previous, in the past as well, the, systematic violations of human rights, EU imposing sanctions on Lukashenko. Then, he knows what strings to pull in order to maybe twist around the Western policymakers, and sort of made this illusion that, he's on the right path, that he's actually leaning towards the Western values. And time to time again, the Western policymakers have fallen into this trap. And I think this is a monumental time for the Western policymakers to understand that actually we have to make the similar position that we have made when it comes to Crimean Peninsula. The non-recognition of the occupation as, with no end term for it. So something similar has to be done when it comes to Belarus, and call for the new elections. It should not be put under any, concessions. It's, an ultimatum that we set forward. But let me just, observe what I have seen so far since last year, August. So many months of the public resistance to Lukashenko's regime have revealed profound changes underway in the Belarusian society, like such things as dignity, individual rights, and demand for self-determination and freedom of expression really have come to the forefront, replacing the paternalistic social contract of the past 2 decades, whereby the public really enjoyed the rising living standards by forfeiting the right to participate in politics. And we see that the opposition is both either imprisoned or in exile, but still it has ignited the politicization of the Belarusian people that was maybe not existent for the past 2 decades. Maybe somebody was more of this, paternalistic approach, that somebody will always take care of me and so on. Now determination that we can actually set our future and decide has somewhat risen within the Belarusian society altogether. And that is, something that we see is constant for the past more than a half year. And so the changes within the Belarusian society indicate that people are ready to seize the opportunity to shape their future. And we know that while, the sanctions that have dominated the Western debate on how to deter Belarusian authoritarian regime, it is vital for us Europeans and the European policymakers to find other tools as well, not only sanctions. So we see that at some point it surfaces that the Belarus right now is experiencing delayed nation building process. People are deciding who they are, how they want to live, and how their relations with neighboring countries should look. So both the movement's political leaders and supporters in civil society need to create space for complex debates over policy and ideas, helping to foster new vision for the country. Only call for the new election won't solve this. This is something, that I think the Belarusian people are just, calling for. So new ideas, how we can transform together the country altogether. So the political change in Belarus will not happen unless public officials as well, their supporters within the society at large, and the members, particularly of the security services, can be convinced to abandon Lukashenko. That actually opposition has not only the call for the new elections, but the substance that comes with, transforming Belarus for a long term. So, I have few suggestions when it comes to the opposition, and with the previous speakers, I would like to invite to avoid labeling new opposition, old opposition. We have the democratic opposition in Belarus. So therefore, the opposition needs to actively shape Belarusian domestic political agenda and show that its members can lead the country by enacting long overdue reforms. It's just not, as I again mentioned, just elections. It also has to have a strong vision. The opposition needs to know how to create policy proposals and offer a new vision that would excite the nation. And here I see the West can play actually a role. We can help by coaching the opposition on how to run a political opposition that holds the government accountable. They must learn how to attract new followers and campaign effectively. They also need to be trained in how to advocate and lobby government officials for change. So this is something that is very interconnected and comes from the society roots, that each Belarusian actually, it's not just, having on Sundays, which is, unprecedented and, remarkable thing, having political marches, but also submitting ideas, even to the current elected policymakers at the Belarusian parliament, because that will be put on but at least will be in a public discussion. Because it's not just, we have walk and call for the new elections, but we have also concrete offers where Belarus should move in the future, whatever the election outcome will be if there are new elections. So I think the West policymakers need to engage with the opposition through different channels to actually provide the tools, the instruments, how the policy is shaped, how the policy is made, how the policy actually is delivered to each individual Belarusian citizen. So I think that is, the so far what I can see in the coming months and the coming, year for the West to really engage. And we do that. We do that through our NGOs. It's not only, policymakers. And that is something that, know-how will help in the long term really transform the Belarus in general. So thank you. Those are my comments for this panel. Thank you.
Ačiū ponui Kols. Namų darbus.
Thank you, Mr. Coles, for your homework to the Belarusian opposition for unity and clear post-transitional agenda. This is what I heard. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Marko Mikkelson, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Estonian Riigikogu. The floor is yours, Mr. Mikkelson.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you, and especially to very good friend Žygimantas. Thank you for organizing this excellent forum, because this truly is one of clear examples how we together keep up attention to this very important historical change what we see in Belarus. What has happened in Belarus since last August actually has created huge admiration, I could say, in democratic world, but here in Estonia as well, of those courageous people who have stood up for dictatorship. And actually, as we heard from previous speakers as well, this has been and still is very dangerous to show your free will in Minsk and other cities of Belarus. But we understand and we see that this is something where, yes, people are afraid, but this mood is not gone, and hopefully in coming days the world will see again that this ongoing people's revolution against nasty and brutal dictatorship is going on and eventually will win, because this is sure that dictatorships could last long, but not forever. And one of the reasons why they will fail is because dictators start to believe in fake belief of their own immortality, and that's something which gives us all hope that the real people's will of Belarusian people will make this huge turn. And actually, when I thought what could be message from here, from Tallinn, one is, as I said, we all here follow very closely what's happening in Belarus, and as previous speakers asked, do we have here in neighboring parliaments of democratic countries enough support? Then I can just reassure that in Estonia, in our parliament, actually, we passed first resolution in support of democracy in Belarus already 11 years ago. 2010, prior to that time presidential elections, and of course we made our position known immediately after the events in Belarus in last August. Actually, I must say that the support of that resolution, support of civil society and free elections in Belarus actually won the highest number of support of Riigikogu, our parliament. We have 101 members, and 92 of those made their voice strongly heard in terms of support of Belarus and Belarusian people. What we have done throughout these several months, actually, as a country, of course, there are a number of topics we could just mention here, but Estonia is currently serving as a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council, and together with our EU partners and allies in North America, with the United States, we have organized several meetings at the level of the Security Council to pay attention to this, what's happening inside of Belarus. Mrs. Tihановskaya has been part of discussions as well. Of course, Estonia, together with other countries, we have kept constantly the topic up in different forums on the level of the European Union and national parliament meetings as well. And this is something what, believe me, is one of the seems very simple, but very important task of us, because as Richard's just made a comment that the path is long, and very much, of course, it very much depends on first and foremost of that energy which is inside of Belarusian people, and among those who stand boldly against Lukashenko's regime. We all have to understand that the path will be rocky, will be long, and it will depend, of course, that the international attentions is not going to fade away, because there are so many challenges currently in the world's politics. Just look into the region or our close neighborhoods. Again, we have heard and seen that recently, during the last several weeks, the tensions in eastern Ukraine are growing again. There are a number of reasons to believe that we could see escalation of a war in Ukraine. And that, of course, will affect again neighboring Belarus. Or if we keep in mind that already there are preparations for a military exercise called Zapad 2021. This is something again which is very much and directly connected to a geostrategic situation in and around Belarus, and of course has direct impact of security situation in our region. So this is why, as I said, we have to keep agenda up in European and international discussions. I very much support the idea what Mr. McAllister said as well, that there should be a strong unity among EU member states, but also, yes, David, I see, we also have to work now with our colleagues in the United States and Canada to keep up very strong and valid response from the democratic community, transatlantic democratic community. And that's something which is not a very good message to dictators, wherever they sit, in Minsk or in Moscow. So this is first and foremost. And secondly, of course, we have to listen carefully what people within Belarus, but also those who fight for freedom outside of Belarus really need, and actually address those needs seriously and without hesitation. Because if we look around us, I mean, as European nations, that already for dozens of years, actually, we as democratic countries are under constant pressure of dictators and authoritarian regimes. And the area of democracy has been under constant pressure, and this is what has happened actually in Belarus. This national awakening during last several months is so precious that we in Europe must understand that if we stand together defending our values and principles, then those people who are living in Europe, like Belarusians do, we don't have any alternative rather than to really find ways how to support their, as I said, long-lasting fight for their freedom. It's not going to be easy, but believe me, the supporters like us here in Estonia and others, we support Belarusian efforts, and we're ready to put together comprehensive plans, of course, in order to achieve this ultimate goal of free elections. But I very much subscribe to this, what Richard said earlier. There is badly an urgent need for substantial debates about the future vision of Belarus. And if Belarus would like to be, and peoples will choose to be democratic and open society, then we have to have also honest and frank discussion about Russia. Because if somebody hopes that Putin's support will help somehow dismantle Lukashenko's dictatorship, that this is very dangerous way of thinking. I'm not calling to make a choice between Europe or Russia, but there must be choice between dictatorship and democracy. Thank you.
Ačiū ponui Mikkelson. Thank you, Mr. Mikkelson, for bringing us closer to a broader context. The like-minded countries and the European Union are very important. Therefore, the position of Estonia in the UN Security Council and support of Estonia would be very important. I think that we should also include the US and Canada to make the outcome more successful. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Marek Kuchcinski, Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Polish Sejm.
We cannot hear you. Maybe microphone is muted.
Can you hear the interpreters now?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. I salute all the participants of the Vincent Kalinowski Forum, and I would like to thank Mr. Pavlionis for this initiative. I would like to take this opportunity to first say that I am subscribing to all the comments made during the main session and the discussion and I subscribe to all the points that call for a determined effort to strengthen freedom and democracy in Belarus. Now, I would like to look at three issues that are related to this. From the Polish perspective, from the perspective of the Polish Parliament, what is the perspective that we have on the Belarusian situation in terms of what the Belarusians have achieved? And I would like to emphasize three things. First and foremost, Belarusians have been successful in overcoming the fear and the sense of being subdued. They protested, and the unshaken determination mean a strong political maturity of the Belarusian nation and society. Secondly, we clearly see that the Belarusian people have awakened their patriotism, and not the sort of patriotism that would be poised against someone. It's the sort of patriotism that shows the identity and amplifies the unity of the entire nation. And thirdly, we see an enormous determination, an enormous resolve of the entire society, and the institutionalization of the entire opposition, the Coordination Council and the Anti-Crisis body. Now, my mind goes back to the 1980s, the time of the Solidarity movement in Poland, and I would like to make this point in the context of the fight for freedom in Poland, and our neighbors bore fruit. We have become members of the European Union, and we regained our freedom, but it took years to achieve that. Now, on the second point I wanted to raise, what has we achieved, societies and the communities of neighbors, what have we achieved to provide support to Belarus? First of all, we provided shelter and a safe haven to thousands of Belarusian citizens who required support, medical aid, and who were seeking an asylum. Secondly, we have mobilized the entire European Union to take a two-tier rapid approach with the 24 million euros to support the society in Belarus. I believe this policy should be continued and strengthened. We have also together taken measures within the EU to document the human rights violations in Belarus. And fourthly, and importantly, we are making sure that the situation in Belarus and the human rights violations are becoming more and more understood internationally, and it is on the agenda of international organizations, the Human Rights Council and the UN, being the prime examples of that. But generally, I would like to second the voice of Mr. Ales Bialiatski, who said that it is not enough. The free world, the democratic world, indeed has come to feel some sort of fear, some sort of anxiety about the situation in Belarus. Therefore, I do share the view, and I would like to emphasize the need for solidarity with the entire Belarusian society. We should show